So Tanya, I saw the Busa commentary on the budget and a sense of some criticisms, and there's been some feedback today that talks about the pain. If we look at all of your constituent members, and obviously you're serving large and small, and you try and sort of consolidate that into a 2019 landscape, won't you help us shape that?
Yeah, so I think that the others have touched on a number of those elements, but I think what we're seeing is that policy is a major constraint. So, and particularly for the small businesses, because the cost of doing business, the red tape, the time it takes to register a business, I think everyone knows the narrative, but really when you do unpack it, it is a considerable challenge. And what we're seeing is that obviously our contribution from both the employment levels, but also from a growth perspective, where we're lacking is the small business sector and the startup sector. So those entrepreneurs and black-owned entrepreneurs and businesses that are actually getting into the economy and playing a meaningful role. So I think that that's a large part of why the economy remains so concentrated and why we're stuck in this low growth trap. There's some positive things coming through. Like last week, I was invited to the World Bank Doing Business session that they're having with government, where they're meeting with all the heads of relevant agencies, trying to unblock the restrictions in terms of registering property, in terms of paying taxes, in terms of UIF and compensation, trying to do a one-shop stop, because that's in line with the President's targets of dropping the ranking from 82, I think it is, down to below 50. So there was, I must say, a sense in that room of a real willingness from the commissioners and the government individuals to really try and work with the problem from a customer perspective. Not from I'm going to fix my UIF system in isolation and not realize that there's actually a much bigger value chain of how we interact. But I think broadly on a policy perspective, and this was our response, I think you would have seen on the budget, is that we didn't see, and we're not seeing enough, and it is maybe because we're in an election year, we're not seeing those step changes in that commitment to really get the economy growing and being pro-growth. So property rights, and I know that it's contentious, but property rights have been tarnished and undermined by the discussion on expropriation without compensation. That's not something that we should be leaving for the next few months to the next administration. We need to be giving certainty both to local investors but international investors. If we look at the visa regime, we sort of started fixing it, we haven't fixed it properly. It's still not right. Minister Mboweni spoke yesterday about foreign skills and how we need to embrace them and help them and help us shift to the next level. Huge constraints. I think at the beginning of January, we were asked to give input into regulations that the Department of Labour is bringing in around employment of foreign nationals. It takes us back 20 years, never mind taking us forward. So, and then the competition legislation, and we're reviewing that now. It's gone through Parliament, but some of that actually creates huge risk where there wasn't risk before to doing business, and huge costs and implications like divestiture, and it ups the ante. So I don't think that we've seen enough in the policy space. On the SOEs, I think our response in terms of the budget was that we really wanted to see tangible action plans. To some extent, and I think recognizing the difficult space that government was in, but to some extent on Eskom, they've just kicked the can down the road. Like they're going to be financing it by 23 billion over the next 10 years, I think it is, each year. That's not, I think, signaling that in line with the State of the Nation address, this restructure, breaking it into three parts, when it's going to be done, how it's going to be done. That's what the rating agencies were looking for. And then I think even on the public sector wage bill, is that we know that the public sector staff base is bloated, and the public sector is not operating as efficiently and effectively and as service-orientated as it could be. It's not embracing the fourth industrial revolution and technology in the way that it should be. What they did, unfortunately, and yes, it gives some relief, is they tinkered. They tinkered around the edges, and it is an unpopular decision, and we know that this is a really tough environment.
So you're saying the tinkering is the elegant retirement, I think the wording
The retirement and yes, we really appreciate the pegging of wages, that there's not going to be salary increases for the high earning employees. So I think that those are important signals. But unless we have those really, really hard, difficult conversations as a country, be it with business in terms of what are we going to do to contribute differently, be it with labor in terms of how do we transform the workforce and create skills that are relevant for the future, that are going to make us competitive, or with government in terms of being more effective, we're not going to make that huge radical change that we need to shifting ourselves onto a higher growth path.
Thank you. Joel, I struggle always because your distinguished career has taken you to so many places on what perspective to ask you from. But I think in sitting in MISTRA, there is an opportunity to look and take a step back at this broader system. And so when we talk about the business landscape in 2019, we obviously can't talk about the business landscape in isolation. I hear sort of a mixed discourse here. I hear things where there are residual strengths, there are opportunities, we have strong institutions. I hear, though, also about a level of pain and frustration. I hear, on one hand, sort of words like tinkering, slow, not fast enough, and on the other hand, the need for radical overhaul. You've had extensive experience also in obviously your role in the National Development Plan. How do we move forward? What's your recommendation?
I think I should start off perhaps by saying that it is quite understandable that there should be contradictory sentiments, not only on the budget, in relation to the budget, but also in relation to the current environment within which the business community is operating. I do not study market movements, but I got a sense from the response to the budget yesterday that the minister might have disappointed, that was the earlier assessment, and then disappointed the disappointment. in the sense that after making an immediate judgment, they realized that there might be much more in the budget that needs to be appreciated. Besides the deft management, I think, of challenges facing state-owned enterprises, and besides social expenditure, there are such issues in the budget as funding for first-time home buyers. He talked about billions in that regard. There are issues to do with the infrastructure program and partnership with the private sector, both of which, as examples, have got huge multiplier effects. And I'm citing these issues merely as examples to make the point. Yes, there are certain decisive actions that need to be taken with regard to state-owned enterprises and the employment in government and so on. But we also need, I think, to develop the psychology, the paradigm of looking for the silver linings. And there are many of them, not only in the budget speech, in my view, but also generally in the economy. I can cite just two, and
Please.
We'll come back to further discussion later. There was reference earlier to opportunities in Africa. And if we were to look at some of the projections, it is estimated that Africa will spend some 200-300 billion US dollars in infrastructure projects by 2021-2022. That will not only improve the efficiency of doing business, but the time has come, in my view, for sub-Saharan Africa and South Africa in particular to pose the question, where will the suppliers for those infrastructure projects come from? Where will the braking systems, signaling systems, the coaches and the locomotives for the railway lines, where will they come from? And that presents, in my view, a major opportunity collectively to say, we can extract manufacturing opportunities from huge expenditures of this kind. And that process become part of global value chains. There are also issues to do with, of course, the fourth industrial revolution, education and all the issues that we discuss on all the time. But we need to pose the fundamental question as South Africans, in my view, how shall we immediately create jobs or work opportunities for the unemployed workers that we have? Unskilled or semi-skilled, young people who are maturing into adulthood without ever having had a job. And so questions about special economic zones need to be posed, I think, at a fundamental level. What is being done currently, in my view, is not sufficient. And we need to expand this, not just one per province at a go, but massively to many rural areas. And some of this even existed before 1994. Because we need to answer that question. What do we need to do for the unemployed workers that we currently have? Not merely workers that will be training for purposes of the future and the fourth industrial revolution. My last point, the sense that one has, and Lungisa will help in this regard, is that if we wanted an immediate stimulus for the economy, we'll need to pose the fundamental question: what are the major growth drivers in our economy? Investment and this and the other. But if I'm not mistaken, some 60% of the drivers for economic growth comes from consumer demand. And so constrained consumer demand has a major impact on whether we can immediately climb up. What needs to be done in that regard, I do not have answers, but issues such as small and micro enterprises arise. But further to that, do we need to employ hundreds of thousands of inspectors to get the business community to comply with the Minimum Wage Act? Or should this be seen as a natural contribution, not only to the good of the country in philosophical terms, but because if we improve consumer demand, it has got that virtuous cycle in the economy as a whole. Yeah, there are many other issues that one can raise, but those are the immediate ones that come to mind.